Hi, I'm Jorge Gestoso. Welcome to a new program. On today's show, the polemic issue of guns in the U.S. Our guest, Guadalupe Correa-Cabrera, Associate Professor in the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University here in Washington. Guadalupe, a warm welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Guadalupe, what do you think about the proposal of President Trump of arming teachers in order to try to combat massive shootings at schools?
I believe this is a proposal out of every proportion and rationality. You cannot really fight violence with violence itself because you generate
fire with fire.
Fire with fire. That's right. I believe this is a very bad idea and a very bad proposal.
In the U.S., a person is 25 times more likely to be killed by a gunshot than any other person on an industrialized country in the rest of the world. U.S., 5% of the population, almost 50% of the guns in the world. The U.S. is 5% of the world population, but 31% of all the mass shootings and crimes. How do you explain that?
This is not surprising. First of all, because the U.S. arms industry is the biggest one in the world. This country has benefited itself from war in the past decades and the past years. Of course, the arm industry. It's the biggest industry in the United States. So they need to sell their arms here in the States and all over the world. Therefore, there are many mechanisms in politics, utilizing the media, utilizing the Constitution to make this possible, to continue selling the arms in a very profitable industry, the arms industry in the United States of America.
So how the NRA, the National Rifle Association, fits in all this?
The National Rifle Association, of course, is formed, or the biggest companies, the arms-producing companies, get organized, get together to promote their agenda, to continue selling arms, and to limit the controls to sell their arms, right? To get richer and to make sure that politicians are not going to limit like other people's access to the arms. So they really, with the lobbying in Congress, they will make sure that their interests are protected. And what are their interests? To sell arms massively. So they can give money to different legislators, congressmen and senators, to make sure that they will be able to continue doing what they are doing really well, which is selling arms without any restriction.
And Senator Bernie Sanders says that he believes that those politicians are bought by that type of lobbies. Do you think it's true?
Well, if you think, I mean, this is not necessarily illegal, but if you have the capacity and the money to fund political campaigns like the campaign of Donald Trump, you give...
They said $30 million supposedly are being given by the NRA to his campaign when he was a candidate. Exactly.
So what is he going to do? I mean, he has some interest to support, right? The people who finance his campaign in an important way, he's not going to go after their interests. And this is what they make sure they will do. They will give the money to them, so they will protect their interests, not their interests of the people. Because they have a lot of influence. In this democracy, in the U.S. democracy, the people who have more money, the biggest economic interest, have more leverage in this democracy.
Regarding all those mass shootings, the former president, Jimmy Carter, said the U.S. is an oligarchy with limitless power of rivalry in terms of political capacity.
That's totally true, particularly when we're talking about arms and gun control laws, because this is what we see. They are the most powerful people in this country, and they are capable of getting together, of mobilizing other people, and driving and making these legislators to do exactly, congressmen and the senators in the United States, to protect their interests. This is totally true, absolutely true.
Do you think that after this mass shooting in Florida, something is going to change? Because, for example, President Trump at the very beginning said that he would like to push the age to 21 years in order to buy a gun, and immediately start to sort of backpedaling and say, well, let's center in mental health issues or other type of things. Do you think that something is going to happen, something is going to change?
Well, definitely, the president of this country seems to be an employee of these companies in that regard because they have contributed to his campaign, so he has to work for them. In a sense, he's an employee of these companies. And that's one thing. However, are thinking that this is not right. They need gun control laws to prevent these massacres from happening. And they are getting together. Kids, mothers of kids that have lost their kids, kids that were in these spaces that needed to be like the safest ones. You're in school. It cannot happen in school. So civil society also has a role. Of course, if you have a democracy that works this way, where the most powerful, the richest man has the capacity to decide how they're going to legislate, but we cannot forget that the people still exist, that the people can still mobilize, that they still vote. I mean, I'm not necessarily hopeless that this can change and the popular mobilization, because this is getting worse and worse and worse. It's not, I mean, we didn't have this massacre of Florida or Vegas. This is going more and more frequent and more frequent. Probably, 10, 20, 60 people, what else? We're gonna have this going over and over and over.
Bernie Sanders mentions also the increase of disparity in the US society lately. And 1%, he says, control the economic interests of the other 90%. Is that plays a role that is not on plain level in terms of everybody can participate with the same chances vis-a-vis of government, and therefore the 1% control the government and the 90% follows?
Well, this is what happens in reality. Usually, like the ones who have more capacity, more economic power are the ones that control and lead policy. But what we are seeing really is pressuring everybody to act in a different way. We're talking about human life here in the United States that are being lost. I mean, we're not talking about only developing countries, that we have to talk about that as well. But I believe that we can think positively. Yes, usually the rich rule the world, and we have very powerful economic interests that make decisions in this. I mean, we're simulating democracies because we really don't have democracies where the power of money is really what drives the policies.
In terms of the social framework that the whole thing is taking place, there is Dr. Joy from the University of Louisiana. He has made a study and said that the average American kid, when he reaches 18, has already been exposed to 16,000 simulated killings or murders, 200,000 acts of violence, that the TV commercials for children are between 50 and 60 times more violent than the TV for adults. And he said that some cartoons are an average of 80 acts of violence per hour. So at which point we're talking about a society that is violence is deeply embedded in their fabric.
Yeah, that's something important to consider. We cannot just talk about like this powerful interest and this very important arms industry. But this is a sociological problem that it's fed by the same thing. It's very convenient for these companies to have all these TV programs, all this violence represented in cartoons, all these superheroes as the superheroes that have the capacity to bear an arm and to kill everybody else. And so kids in disintegrated societies, like this one in the United States, societies are very developed, very individualistic, without enough controls into sociological aspects to have more networks to prevent these things like people getting together, these very individualistic societies, disintegrated families. So you have kids that want to become superheroes, and the only way that they can feel that they are powerful is to bear an arm and to be able to kill others. These are the messages that are being given to kids in a society where everybody feels that they are failing because of all these media, all these TV programs, that you have to be rich, that you have to be happy. So the frustration and these other messages that are negative instead of positive. This combination of messages.
You were talking precisely of a society disintegrated, and some figures shows that since the massacre in Columbine, the shooting, 75% of the people who were doing the massive shootings after that were not having dads at home.
That's very important because, and this has to do with the message of the superhero. They don't have a hero in their houses. They don't have a father. They don't have a figure that they could emulate, a leader. So the only people that they have as a framework, a reference, are these superheroes that have access to arms. So they want to emulate them because they don't have a family. So this is part of a society that is very sick, that needs to be reframed in a way. And we need to think about this as a sociological problem, as a psychological problem, and a problem of economic interest. This is very complex.
There were polls that shows that now 70% of the American population is in favor of stricter laws against guns. That is up from 52% that was in October when the Las Vegas shooting took place. Do you think there is more awareness now that something needs to be changed than some other shootings before that?
Totally, and that's why I'm not hopeless. I have hope because the increase in the percentage of people that supported gun control laws, it's incredible. I mean, the growth of this. They have been observing not only these two big massacres, they have been observing events after event after event. So people are becoming more conscious and are getting together. As we were talking about this movement, this mobilization, these marches, and you have to stop this. This doesn't have to continue, and this is a message that the kids have been able to portray after this last massacre in Florida.
Precisely, that movement that the kids, that the survivors of the school shooting in Florida, they have created the movement Never Again. And they are organizing a march here in Washington on March 24th. Do you think that this movement is going to evolve?
Well, you would think because of what we talked about the democracy in this country, how this works, but also we have observed the support to have gun control laws that is growing. This percentage is growing. People cannot see this is becoming a real tragedy in the United States. This is affecting many people, many lives, and people are not feeling safe. People fear. And so this fear is making not only these kids, their families, other people to become more conscious. So I am hopeful that this is going to be a national movement, and the congressmen and senators have not only to respond to economic interests. As you know, also, some of the companies like Delta Airlines, or some airlines are trying to separate from the NRA and these interests that are not allowing to have any control and are contributing to these tragedies to occur in the state.
Many experts that I observed that the kids were talking about, the survivors of that school in Parkland, they were so sharp with the social media, a new era in terms of utilizing the resources that you have, that the society now have.
Yes, I think so. I mean, social media, this new mass media that's being utilized to get people together, to portray a message that is needed. We are seeing it. I mean, we are not hopeless. We can, as I said, more and more people are more friendly with that movement. They are learning of what happened. You can gather more people through social media, and young generations are the ones that have access to that because they were born with that. Therefore, I believe that this is going to become massive, not only in this country, but maybe abroad. This can become an international movement. But let's see, what are the final results?
We have seen the Me Too movement. Women that are organizing to denounce the sexual abuse and sexual harassment and all types of abuses from men. So this is a new era in terms of the US or in the world, maybe, the Me Too, the Never Again?
I believe so. And with the Me Too movement, what I have seen is that in other countries in the world, more women and more women are arriving, and they are saying Me Too. And they are also denouncing sexual abuse in not only in the United States, as I said, but movements are getting together and are transforming their societies. Therefore, I think the Never Again movement also has the capacity of reproducing itself in other parts of the world, because American arms are not only killing American people, are killing people from other countries like Mexico and Central America and many other countries in the world. In the Middle East, many of the arms that kill people in the world are produced in the United States.
Talking about, you mentioned Mexico, you mentioned Central America. According to new figures, Central America is the area with more violence in terms of guns. El Salvador with 90 killings every 100,000 inhabitants, and also we're talking about Honduras with 67. There are larger figures than in war zones. What's going on? And is these killings are being done with guns coming from the U.S.?
Definitely. The great majority of the arms come from the United States because of the costs of transportation, of course. And the access to so many arms in Central America, in Mexico, drug cartels, transnational gangs, they have access to that. So criminal organizations, transnational organized crime is being militarized, and the response is militarized as well. For example, let's remember that in Mexico we had a group that's called Los Zetas, and Los Zetas have their origins in the Mexican army.
And you have written a book about that.
Yes, Los Zetas Incorporated, and I explained that.
I explained what?
I explain how organized crime, because of access of these arms and because of the training, the military capacities, and the access to high caliber weapons, created a militarized criminal model that was, and the response of the state was militarizing security. So you generate a war, internal war, a new war, I call it a new civil war, an economic war, where you have two armies. And they are killing their own people. We had last year, one of the most violent years. We had been fighting a war since 2006 against organized crime. And last year, we had the largest number of assassinations.
Talking about how many?
Talking about last year, higher than 25,000 killings in 1 year, 27,000 murders.
You were mentioning 125,000.
I know, that's overall. 125,000 overall deaths in the country since the war started, over 125,000 assassinations in Mexico as a product of the war against drugs, where you had these two armies taking place together, these armies confronting together. And also you have the model of the gangs, the transnational criminal gangs like MS-13, Barrio 18, how their model is reproduced, and they have access to high caliber weapons, and they can extract rents from their own people, and these people have to leave their countries.
And many of those guns, for example, are bought in the border of Mexico with the U.S., for example, in Texas or in Arizona, and they go and buy massive amounts of guns?
Well, an American citizen can buy any number of guns that you can. For example, in Texas, if you have your ID, you can buy them and you can sell it to anybody. So the problem is this: that okay, it's registered that you bought the arms, but you can sell it to other people, and there's no register of who you sell, who are the second or third generations that you're selling, the second or third person, and the owners of the arms. So this has been happening. So you can buy 300 arms one day, next day 300 arms, and you can sell it to the criminal groups, to the transnational criminal gangs. And you just pass them, and there are no controls in the customs area, in the customs of Latin American.
So in a way, it's perverse, if you want, what the Americans are doing in terms of they are pointing the fingers that the Mexicans are killing each other, like whatever they want to call them, but they are the ones who makes nothing to stop that gun, if you want, contraband or export of guns, because they could, if they really don't want to have that war down there, they could be more severe or critical in the control of guns.
Exactly. Registering who has the possession of the arms. You lose the track. Somebody buys them, and you can ask somebody to buy like 100 each one day, 100 arms the second day, and you will never be registered. You're going to buy the arm from this person, and there are no rules, there are no regulations that tell you that you have to be registered as well. So this is very convenient for arms industry in the United States, because you can sell a limited number of arms and with no control. So gun control is very important in this case, and the United States can help. So can help in a way to address to some extent this problem.
And talking about the control, what do you think about the wall that with Mexico that Donald Trump proposes to stop crime and guns and all what he says?
Well, that would be great if this wall can also prevent arms from going down. But there's a market, so people are going to. I mean, a wall is not going to stop drugs going to the United States or arms going to the South if there is a market, and there are no controls for that. In the case of the arms, right? You control the consumption of drugs, but you are just proposing a solution that's totally irrelevant for this. I mean, the drugs can come through sea, can come through the. We know as well that most of the arms that arrive to the United States arrive in the formal ports of entry, like the formal international bridges. So you don't need to build a wall to stop the flow of drugs. And of course, you also transport them through 18-wheelers, and there is no control in those areas. There's very few capacity of ICE, Customs and Border Protection, to verify how many of the arms and drugs are crossing. They have very few.
What about the political issue here between Mexico and the U.S.? The President Peña Nieto was addressing this issue of guns with Trump, or Trump with the President of Mexico, and they reach any type of
They haven't reached any agreement with regards to that. Also, in the previous administration, Obama, Felipe Calderon, Mexicans put that theme on the table, but there's nothing that has been done. And what they can do, I mean, particularly because we're talking about Mexico, if the President of the United States does not want to address the issues of his own people here in the United States, no gun control laws for that's killing the people here in this country. Do you think that they will do something to protect the lives of Mexicans? There doesn't seem to be any political will at this point, particularly by this administration, because of that money that we're talking about, because of the fact that the President of the United States and many of the legislators are acting like employees of the owners of the manufacturers, the arms manufacturers.
Do you think that this issue of guns is going to have an impact in the midterms elections in November this year?
Probably yes, because of the people that are supporting now the establishment and the creation of gun control laws. I think that numbers also matter, and we cannot undermine the fact that over 70% of the population is against the current situation.
Yeah, because mostly what is expected from the kids, the survivors of the school shooting, is that the ones who oppose, the legislators who oppose gun control, are going to pay the price in the ballot boxes.
That's right. That's why I'm not hopeless. I think that popular mobilization, social mobilization, the movements that we are seeing today can be transformed into political participation, electoral participation, and that would really have an impact. And these people that are now performing as the employees of these companies, of the arms manufacturers, might change their mind when their positions are at stake, and many people are not going to vote for them.
So you think that, in bottom line, the last question, do you think that these kids have created a new momentum in the history of the U.S. with the Never Again?
I believe so. I believe so. Because with the capacity that they have to understand social media, to understand technology, they have created a national movement that can be transformed and be translated into political participation and election results.
Guadalupe Correa-Cabrera, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.